Okay, welcome to chapter 3. Now I will show you how I further enhance the mood in my images. In this case I like to use the Orton effect. It's a really common used method lately, but you can really do it differently, and you can also really mess things up quickly if you don't be really um, precise, and let's say if you don't use it in the right way. Everybody has his own taste, of course, but like I said, you can really overdo it fast, so it really destroys the image. Um, in my case, I use it really subtle. I have a couple different methods to create this Orton effect, and what it generally does is it softens the image, and at the same time it adds contrast, so it gives it a dreamy kind of look, and it helps some scenes to increase the mood. Let's say when you have some really misty light going on in the forest, like in this case I had some evening light peeking through at the top, and there was some what's the water flying around and mist and all that, and I like to enhance these kind of moods. At the same time, you could use it when you have, let's say, there's a valley with some fog and some morning sun hitting it, then you get this really glowy look, and with the Orton effect you can further enhance that. It really depends on the image, how much you use and which version of the effect you use. Like I said, I have a couple ones. I will show you 3, and it really depends which one I like the most. I will show you all 3, and then I pick the one. Then I pick the best in my eyes. I have an action for this, of course, because I don't do it manually all the time. And there's also one option in the Nik section from Google, in the Nik Color Effects Pro panel from Google. It's a really good filter, and I will show you later on which filters I use in general. But first of all, like I said, I will show you some ways to create the Orton effect. The first way is I make 2 background copies. Okay, and on the layer on the top here, I apply a filter. So I go to the filter menu, go to blur and Gaussian blur, because like I said, I want to blur the image so I get this soft look. Now I can pick a radius here. It depends on the image size. In this case, I had a high resolution camera, the Nikon D800E. So I usually pick a size between 30 and 40. But in this case, I downsized the image a bit for performance issues, so I can better record this video. So now I made a 24 megapixel file out of it, and that's the reason why I will go down with the radius a bit, something in the 20s. So let's say, yeah, 27, yeah, depends. Then I press OK. And what I do now is I go to the blend mode and I pick screen to lighten the image, like you can see here. Then I will stamp those layers together to get a completely new one. To do that, I will press Ctrl Alt Shift E. Now I have a new one, and like you can see now, it's too bright, of course. So I want to darken it down again. To do this, I go to the blend modes, and then I pick multiply. And now you see, it's darkened again. And now I will merge those 3 layers together. Perfect. And now I can work with the opacity, because like you can see now, it got really dark and contrasty. So we'll go down to something like, well, let's say 25. That's usually a good starting point. And now I can check what it did. When I turn it on and off, you see, it brought contrast to the image, and at the same time it softened it a little bit. It enhanced this dreamy mood, and I really like this. It can happen that some parts of the image get a bit too dark because of the contrast adjustments, and some other parts can get a bit too light because of the contrast adjustments. And if I don't want this, I can just simply block the effect out of some parts with, let's say, a mask. I could just paint somewhere, or I can do it better with a luminosity mask. In this case, I don't bother much, since it was a forest, so it was dark already, so I don't care about darker parts here in the corners. I will use a vignette later on anyway. But what I see, which I don't like, is it got a bit too bright in some parts of the water and on the top here. So I will block this effect with a luminosity mask. To create it, I control click on the RGB channel, I save it with this button, and there you have it. Now I will shrink it down by control clicking on it, and then control alt shift and click a couple of times, because I know that I want the brighter parts, not the mid-tone lights and so on. I just want the brightest parts. So I pick this one here. Yeah, that looks good. So I control click, and then I add a mask here to the layer, and there you see. Now I have the exact opposite. I didn't like this because now I have the effect applied only to the water since it's white, but I want it to apply here in the forest, so I have to invert it. So I press Ctrl I, and there you have the opposite. Perfect. And when I turn this on and off, you see it at the top here especially. Here you see it's subtle, but it removed some of the effect here in the water. And that's important because all the adjustments add up, you know. So when I make more and more contrast adjustments, it can happen that some parts of the image get way too bright, or let's say way too dark, and then it's really hard to turn it back. So I always try to remove adjustments in the parts where I don't like them at the beginning already. Okay, what also happens when I use this glow effect is that I lose some details. And to overcome this, I can bring it back with a filter. And to do this, I will just Control Alt Shift E to get a completely new blank layer. Not blank, but a completely new layer. And I will apply a filter to it. It's called, you can find it on the filter, other, and it's called High Pass. It sharpens edges in the image. It increases the contrast on edges. And it depends on how much pixels you pick. The higher amount you see, the more the more pixels are selected, so the more contrast I'm adding. But in this case I want a small contrast and a small sharpening amount. Not so small, because I don't just want to sharpen the image, I also want to increase a bit of the structure. So I use something around 7. You see it, all the contours here, they will be increased. When I press OK, then I see the gray image, but in this case I have to apply it to the layer below, so I have to use a blend mode. And you have 3 options. You can use overlay, soft light, or hard light. In this case I use soft light because it's in the middle of those, and it's not that hard of a contrast adjustment. So I take this one, and when you see now, yeah, it brought out the detail, but way too strong. I don't like it. I just want it to be applied to the Gaussian blur layer. And to do this, I have to create a clipping mask by right clicking on it here, and I press create clipping mask, and there you see. Now you see this arrow here. Now it's only applied to the layer below, not in general. And when I turn it on and off, there you see it's really subtle, but it brings back some detail. That's a good thing. Let's say I'm not sure which pixel amount I should pick, so I keep trying until I find the amount I like. Then of course it's hard to always delete the layer, create a new one, and so on. To overcome this issue, I can just create a smart object. And a smart I told you in the first chapter, sorry, not in the first, in the last chapter already, that a smart object helps me to get back to the filter I used, so I can readjust the settings. I could have done this also already with the Gaussian blur layer, but in this case I was kind of comfortable with the amount I picked. But when you want to try an arrow at the beginning, you can of course also create a smart object at the Gaussian blur layer. That's no problem at all. I will show you how it works. So let me delete this. I will click on Control Alt Shift E to get the new layer back, and then I will right click on it to get the smart object. It should say here, convert to smart object. Then it takes a while until it renders. There it is, and now I can open up the filters again, go to other, high pass. I will pick 7 pixels again since I like it. Press OK. Try the blend mode soft light. You can of course play with the others as well. Then I will create a clipping mask so it only interacts with the Gaussian blur layer. Here it is, perfect. If I find the effect too strong, I can work with the opacity, or I can just go back to high pass, and there you see I can readjust the amount of pixels. Say I want to pick 10, then I have a higher radius. Yeah, perfect, but I like 7, so I go back to 7. Good. Okay, I don't want this effect to happen in the water because I want to keep it nice and smooth. It's already not applying too strong to the water since I have a mask on this Gaussian blur layer, but I want to further keep it out there, so I will just use this luminosity mask here. Maybe another one. Let's say let me shrink it down a bit and check it. Yeah, I will use this one, and when I take the foreground color here, black, and then I use a mask, there you see. Now I have the effect only in the water. I don't want this. I will press Ctrl I, and now I block it out of the water. Perfect. And I probably also want to block it up here because I want this evening light to soften the trees. So I can just paint black on this layer now to block the effect. I will use 100% opacity, and this will keep the light nice and soft up there, so the high pass filter doesn't sharpen it too much. Okay, perfect. This is the first method. I can now group it and call it Orton 1. I will delete those channel masks, and I will now show you the second option. It's a bit easier. I go to first of all I have to make a copy, so I press Ctrl J. I go to filter again. I could use a smart object, of course. Go to blur, Gaussian blur, 27 pixels, amount let's say 25. Now you see it's really blurry. I want to add contrast now. To do this, I just open this layer menu here, go to levels, create a clipping mask because I only wanted to interact with the Gaussian blur layer, and now I can work with the contrast. Yeah, something like this. Good. Now it's a bit too strong in the highlights, so I will create a luminosity mask again. So I will control click on the RGB channel, and it's important that when you make a new adjustment that you always create the luminosity mask, because when you save the channel here it will stay untouched, you know, but when I make another adjustment the channels above will change. So let's say here when I make it darker, you see the channels here, they're getting darker, and when I make it brighter they will get brighter, but the mask will stay the same. So let's say I brightened up the image and now I want to work with the highlights. When I pick this mask it's completely wrong because it was built on the image before, so I have to redo this luminosity mask so I can make the adjustment based on the brighter image now. Otherwise I will get weird halos and edges, and that's what I don't want. That's not the purpose of the luminosity mask. So it's like I said, it's important you always redo it after you make some adjustments. When you made some small sharpening adjustments or let's say noise removal, then it's probably not necessary, but when you make further contrast or color adjustments it can be, and mostly it is. Okay, I want the brighter parts, so I will shrink it down again. So I press Control and Control Alt Shift, shrinking it down, something like that. Okay, that's good, and I will apply it here to the mask. I did it by clicking Alt and Backspace, so it added up to this white mask. I had the foreground color to black, so it just brought in the black paint into the mask based on the selection I made before. And that's good. Now it blocks the effect out of some parts in the water so it doesn't get too blurry and too bright. But it also removed the effect up here in the trees. I don't want this, so I can now paint black on the trees again to get the effect back. And the problem can be now that I destroy the luminosity selection like you see here, and when I, let's say, want to get it back and I paint white, then I don't have the selection again, and that's a problem. And to overcome this, I will show you a little trick. First of all, I have to remove this by pressing Ctrl Alt Z or Z. There it is. And now I will group this adjustment by pressing Ctrl. I will group this. I will group this adjustment. No, sorry, I have to group the layer mask, not the whole adjustment. Press Ctrl G. What happened now? Let me first check. No, I understand. That was wrong. I'm sorry. When I group everything, when I group this mask, then I lose the clipping mask. But that's something new for me also. Let me try when I group it. And now let me see if when I create. No, I can't. But I can maybe. No, okay, that was a bad idea. Don't group it. Otherwise, I will lose the clipping mask. I don't want this. In this specific case, I have to do it like I did because I would otherwise use the clipping mask. But I will show you in a further chapter what I meant exactly with this kind of technique. So I have to be kind of precise now, but it's okay since the sunlight was really strong up there anyways. It doesn't matter if it fades into the water a little bit or into some other parts here. Maybe it will look even better when I do it like this. Okay, so now I have the blur effect back here up in the trees. That's good. Okay, good. Now the same thing happened like before. I lost some details, so I will create a new layer by pressing Ctrl Alt Shift E. I won't use the Smart Object option now because I will use the 7 pixels again on the high pass one. So I click here, press Soft Light, too strong again, so I will create a clipping mask. Perfect. It now interacts again with the layer below, and this one in this case, and there you see it adds some detail. Perfect. And now I can group everything if I want. And let me check the difference. Okay. Maybe in this case I want to add even a bit more detail. So let me redo it. Now I could have done it with the Smart Object, of course. Would be easier. Yeah, I will probably do that. Convert to Smart Object. So I can recheck. Takes a while. Okay, there it is. Filter, other, high pass, and now I will pick 9 pixels. And I go to soft light. Create the clipping mask, and there it is. Yep, that looks good. Perfect. I will call the group Orton number 2, and now I can already check the difference. Let me see. That's Orton 2. And that's Orton 1. In this case, I maybe even like Orton 2 a bit more. It's a bit more dreamy kind of look. If it's too strong, I can work with the overall opacity of the group. So I can go down to like 75, so it's not that strong. But in this case, I like the effect a bit more than the first one, because it gives it, yeah, it looks a bit more dreamy, and I think that fits nicely to the forest scene. I will further work with the contrast later on anyways, so it removes a bit of the mood again, but it's a good starting point in my opinion. I will still show you the third method, and I will probably even combine it with one of those two here. I'll show you why. So the third method is a Nik filter. I have this Nik filter menu up here from the Nik collection by Google. It's for free now, so I highly recommend it. There's no reason to not get it and try it. And I mostly use the Color FX Pro 4 panel. And there's some of my favorite filters here. And in this case, I will use the Glamour Glow filter. In the future chapter, I will show you more about my favorite filters. But right now, I will just use this one. So I click on Glamour Glow. It's exactly, not exactly, but it's pretty much the same like a Gaussian blur filter. But the good thing is I have some more options, like you can see here. I can work with the saturation, and I can work with the temperature of the image. In this case, I don't want to reduce the saturation, so I go back to 0. Here's the glow, so I can work with the Gaussian blur. There you see. I like the default in this case, but I want to warm up the image a bit. And now I'm only watching some parts of the forest and up here on the light. I don't care for the water right now. And if I want to, let's say, further work with the shadows, I could use the shadow slider. When I turn it up, I remove the effect out of the shadows. When I turn it down, I get some more effect into the shadows. I don't care right now because I'm only watching some parts up here. But I can do the same with the highlights. Now I get a stronger effect in the highlights, and when I go bring it down, I get, oh sorry, here I get a lesser effect in the highlights, and when I turn it down, I get a stronger effect in the highlights. I maybe want to even increase it a bit, so yeah, something like this. Okay, so I press OK. I won't use this filter now because I have a problem. When you see, when I increase the warmth, I also warming up the water. I don't like this effect because water needs to be cooler in my opinion, and it was even really cold, so why should the water be warm? Okay, so I will use a mask to just use this effect in some parts of the image which I like. And to do this, I will just alt click on this mask button here, so I get a black mask. Okay, now I press B for the paintbrush. I can increase it with my little trick I showed you before. I will paint white. I will press X to get the white color. And now I use the opacity about 30. When I press 3, I get 30. When I press 4, I get 40. And when I press 5, I get 50, and so on. It's easier, so I press 3 now. And now I will paint in this effect up here in the evening light scene. Something like this. I will further enhance it later on, but that's a good starting point. And I will also do it on some of the greens here where some evening light can hit it. Something around here and there. Not too strong because I already added glow before. Something like this. So that's a bit more incremental. I won't hit the water like I said. And now I have the glow only happening in the forest. So that's one more method to use this Orton effect. And I quite like it. And now I will combine it with one of the others. So first of all, I have to delete it again. I just showed you how I can use it. But like I said, I will combine it. So I will delete it. And I will activate Orton 2 because I like this one the most. And based on this selection, I will stamp the layer by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E. Right click on it, use convert to smart object so I can go back and forth. Open up the Glamour Glow again. Okay, settings were 0, warmth was really high, and highlights also. Press OK. Okay, now you see way too warm. I don't like it at all, so I will use the black mask to hide everything. And now I will just paint it up there where I like it. Paint with a white brush again. Somewhere here. Here in the greens. And a bit in the forest. Not too much since I used the glow before. That's good. Perfect. And now I can group those two again by I have this marked, and then I shift click on the bottom and then I press Ctrl J so I have them all, and now I call it Orton plus Glamour Glow. turn it on and off. And if it's too strong, I can remove the effect out of some parts here. It's the bright part, so I will add a layer mask with a black brush, and I can paint it out here with 30% opacity if I like. Just in the water so it doesn't get too bright. That looks good. And I turn it on and off. And if it's overall a bit too strong, I can of course further work with the opacity. So like I said, now I combined two different methods to use the Orton effect. I use the Glamour Glow and my Orton 2 version. Usually I only use one of them, but in this case I like the combination, the warm feeling from the glamour here of the image and in some parts of the forest. Time I like how it blurs the water overall in the other version, and that's the reason why I combined it. And when I'm fine with this, I can of course merge all those options together now, because then I will save space in my file. I will do this at the end of the video so it doesn't get too big, but if you always want to have the opportunity to adjust it, you can choose the color panel, the high pass panel, and further work with it, cause that object. Okay, I will delete Orton number because I don't need it, and I will keep those two like I said. And actually all I wanted to do in this, so you saw how I have options to use effect. More of them you can just use a standalone. It works good. In the next chapter I will show you some of my other filters in collection and how I used specifically this image. See you later.